Hey, I'm Connor.
And I'm
Hey,
Charlie.
Connor.
And I'm
Hey,
Charlie.
Connor.
And I'm Charlie.
And we're Friends Stream Sports. We're real friends who talk about real sports, and we had some real big feedback, and we've got some really great guests here tonight.
Yes, we do. First hot take of the night. Your guests tonight are very special.
Guests here tonight. Your guests are so special, and I have so many windows open. We're rocking and rolling here, and I think everything is muted that needs to be muted. Charlie, can you hear me? And where are you coming from tonight?
Connor, I can hear you. I am coming from scenic Winfield, Illinois.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Well, for those of you who don't know, Charlie is a great friend, and he is joined, maybe coming in from the background with some potential laughs from time to time, with another great friend, Mr. Tom Burgraff. And we're going to be talking some sports tonight. So are you into talking some sports?
I'm down. What sports are you trying to talk about?
I think that we need to be definitely into talking about some college football. It's tough to not talk about sports in the fall without that.
Well, you're in luck because I don't know a ton of sports, but that's the one I know. And I got some opinions, man.
Oh, good. Well, first off, love that cigar you got going. We have another guest here. He's about ready to come in. Should I let him in?
That's up to you. You're in charge of the show, man.
All right, let's let our other guest in.
Second hot take of the night. I think you should let him in.
Oh, who do we got? Oh my gosh.
Hey, friend.
So much feedback, and we love it.
We're gonna mute me.
Good.
He's muted, don't worry.
Good. Well, so it seems like we have a few cigars for our outdoor guests tonight. What kind of cigars are we smoking?
Got a Olivia Series O
Series O over here.
for Mr. Bell, and I'm a CAO Flathead 660, and we got about 5 years of age between both of these.
Whoa. Well, that's a lot classier than I could ever smoke. As y'all may know, I kind of get in the fetal position whenever I get near a cigar around my mouth.
Yes, or any other place for that matter. And if I'm mistaken, you are a fan of the pipe.
Yeah, oh yeah. No, so for all of our viewers and watchers out there tonight, as we're live here with Friends Stream Sports, Connor, a fun fact about Connor is that he is very sensitive to nicotine. So a cigar is kind of his worst nightmare in a lot of ways, especially when he's smoking that. So, but nevertheless, we're so excited to be here tonight. And we're going to start here with our kind of some of our first quarter topics here tonight when Friends Stream Sports. As usual, our format, we've got 4 topics that we're going to be talking about. And we're so excited to have Charlie on. I've always enjoyed talking college football with Charlie and can't wait to continue that conversation. So Charlie, as we really kick off with the SEC, I know that you've been following Alabama for a long time, and we've watched a lot of Alabama football together. But as it relates to this year, would love to hear, just really starting off, it seems like, who's still left in the SEC? A lot of folks have been knocked off. Who do you think is still left?
I think it'd be really hard to deny that Georgia looks like they're for real this year. And as like you said, I am an Alabama fan, so that does make me a little bit nervous for their prospects for that perennial, conference championship matchup with the playoff implications. But it's hard to tell this early in the season. As you know, one of the fun things about this time of year is seeing who's for real, who's fallen victim to the overhyping of the summer. And it's just really going to play out how Georgia does against some of those bigger opponents. They had a great win over Clemson, but then now they're 3-2 right now. So they're having some issues. So it'll be interesting to see how they do match up.
Right. Yeah. Clemson is no longer in the top 25.
Yes.
Even though they're 3-2, no longer in the top 25. So definitely an interesting piece to follow there. And that game against Florida, unfortunately, is getting less and less important. So let me to kind of parlay this a little bit. Florida lost this past weekend against Kentucky. Do you think that the Florida loss to Kentucky was a little bit more due to Florida coming down off of that Alabama game and Kentucky playing up, or more of a true sentiment of where each of those teams were this season?
I think Kentucky is always one of those bubble teams. I think they are never a bad team. And occasionally they have a couple playmakers that the ball bounces the right way a couple times, they can pull one off. And considering that game came down to, I believe it was some pretty heroic goal line stand shenanigans for Kentucky, that could have easily gone the other way. And, bringing that also back, I see right now Kentucky's ranked 16 when last week they were ranked nothing. So some people that are paid more money than me seem to think that was a significant win. But also it goes back to what I was talking about preseason hype and those preseason rankings not really meaning much until some teams actually play. So who knows? If Kentucky were in the Big Ten, they might be a perennial 9-3 team. But playing in the SEC, they 6-6, 7-5, that kind of season. You just never know how good they are until you see them stack up against some of the big boys. And you know what? That I have a soft spot in my heart for Florida, even though they're not my team. But I think Florida is one of those big boys, and Kentucky showed that given enough chances, they can make plays, and they did what they needed to do to win. And winning's hard. It's hard to win football games.
That it is. We have one current coach and 3 folks who have at least coached some football on our Friend Stream Sports tonight. So I'm going to parlay this over to Tommy real quick. Speaking of Kentucky, as we know, Kentucky is not just known for really their basketball team, maybe this year their football team a little bit. Tommy, as it relates to the other Kentucky pastime, which is bourbon, give us your hot take of give us some quick bourbon power rankings.
Ooh. Bourbon power rankings. What a segue, Connor. Thank you. I think a perennial favorite is the Buffalo Trace group. So you'd be familiar with Buffalo Trace, which is lower, but they are also Happy Van Winkle, who does the super high end stuff that goes in the gray market.
Friend of the show, Pappy Van Winkle.
Mr. Van Winkle would very much be a friend of this show.
Yeah, but they also do one of the things that I'm a fan of is Eagle Rare and Colonel E.H. Taylor. Colonel E.H. Taylor is by rule for myself and for much more bourbon. If you see a it's story history of being one of the first funded, which means by the government during prohibition. So they have a rich history. They've been continuing to come out with stuff with relatively minimal marketing and really just kind of crushing it from a family-owned distillery. Also, you'll see a higher price, and there was a run on some of their bourbon about a year and a half ago, from Buffalo Trace, because one of their historic houses where they do the aging actually collapsed and caught on fire. So it's a very real supply chain thing where if you're taking a dozen years to age something, we'll be seeing the effects of that for several years to come, which I think is more in their favor. Outside of that area, I would say High West out of Salt Lake City, of all places, is definitely a distillery to watch in a place that a state that previously was almost entirely dry. Not many people know this, but you can't actually serve alcohol in bars openly. It has to be done behind a curtain. One of the top places that is being rated is coming out of there, which is just really impressive and has started a really great culture out there. So it doesn't have to be in Bourbon County. That's it from my end.
No doubt. I appreciate that. A little Pappy, a little High West. All good times for sure. And if anybody is watching us tonight on Twitch, feel free to pop in some of your favorite bourbons as we're continuing our conversation here on Friends Stream Sports. To get back into the SEC talk, Charlie, would love to hear some of your thoughts. And Tommy, feel free to chime in as well. But, Ole Miss played Alabama this past week. The game kind of got out of hand a little bit, especially in the first half. Charlie, what are you going to be thinking about Ole Miss as the season continues?
We talked earlier about how every big time matchup comes down to about 4 or 5 plays. And I think Ole Miss, following what historians will call popcorn gate with Lane Kiffin. But I think if you look back at that game, that first half, Alabama got a pretty big turnover deep in their own territory to stop Ole Miss from scoring. Then Ole Miss went for it on 4th. I think the first 4 times they were on 4th down. They made it the first 2. They got stopped on that 3rd one, which turned the ball over to Alabama again, deep in their own territory. I think it was 4th and goal from the 6 or something like that, and they went for it. And then the 4th time, Ole Miss was on their own 30, went for it, and didn't get it, which led to 2 or 3 plays later, Alabama punching it in nice and easy. I think when you look at that, I think Lane Kiffin knew that last year was a fluke. When what was the score, like 190 to 170, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he knew that wasn't going to be a repeat, and so he came out swinging. When you know that you're outmatched. He even said to the opening or the analysts on the field, like, look, Alabama has better athletes than us, so we got to make the big plays. He said that verbatim. So for him to say that says to me, he's swinging for those fences, and you're going to go for it on 4th. You're going to have a couple fakes, a little trickeration in there, some misdirection. And had those gone the other way, I don't think it would have gotten out of hand so early, in which case it would have been tighter going forward. But as you know, if you're down, 5 scores at halftime, you got to come out pretty one-dimensional. The clock is not your friend. You got to start aerating, in which case Alabama can go to their prevent defense and shut you down. I don't think that is 100% indicative of the talent differential. So I think it was closer than the score would suggest.
How much would you say the morale factor of going for it on 4th and actually being able to convert is, especially when you're outmatched like that? I feel like that always, if you convert a 4th, I think there's a lot of excitement, right?
Yeah.
But if you're doing that against an opponent that you believe is better than you, do you think that's almost like a strategic motivator to the team?
100%. I coach high school football, and we're having a little bit of a down year this year, but I can tell you that there are some times that I, as a coach, go in going, okay, we got to really play at our best to compete with these guys. No reason we can't. There's no reason we can't beat anybody. That's why I love the game. But you do have to take some shots early to instill in your players, hey, we can beat these guys. Might be tough. It's going to be a battle, but we can do it. So I think going for it pretty early on is a great way to lay that foundation of going into halftime. Maybe you're down 2 scores at half, going like, hey, two passes away from getting back in this thing. And so you keep the dream alive. And so I do believe that was definitely strategic in the morale for the team.
No doubt. And definite roll of the dice. And Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin definitely known for rolling the dice. I for one was somebody who thought that Ole Miss, at least on the scoreboard, was going to give Alabama everything that they could handle, maybe a little bit more, but probably just about everything Alabama could handle. But you're right. You stop. Alabama stopped Ole Miss on a few of those 4th downs kind of early on, and that Alabama offense is so good that they can punch it in, and before you know it, you're down 3 scores, and then you just have to go for it on 4th down. I expect Ole Miss to really continue to play well. I think Lane Kiffin is, kind of a jerk enough that he's going to make sure his team's prepared. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And be ready to go score a zillion points on everybody else the rest of the season.
I know this is a family show, but I think Lane Kiffin was definitely exhibiting some of that Big D energy, and was very happy to instill that into the team whenever possible. And to your point, Tommy, watching the players react, they made their first 2 4th-down conversions.
Right. Oh yeah.
And it was a different game at that point in the matchup. Even the announcers could say it, like, man, look at this. They're getting it. Can Alabama stop these guys? Like, what are these linebackers going to do? Stop them once and then snatch that momentum away. That's what they did. So as, again, a fan of Alabama, you hate to see it. But yeah, I think Ole Miss is not the team they were 4 or 5 years ago.
Very, very true. And some great SEC talk. I think we are, and to kind of transition into our second quarter topic as we sort of do a quick, top team overview. For sure right now, no one is arguing about Georgia or Alabama #1 and Georgia #2. Do you think that, assuming an undefeated Alabama plays an undefeated Georgia in the SEC title game, if no matter what the score, like if both teams are undefeated, do you think that they will both end up being in the playoffs, or at least have a great chance of both teams being in the playoffs?
I think
either if Georgia clips Alabama or vice versa.
I think they would both have. I think it'd be a very good chance they both make it. But as we know, it's very dependent on who else is in the field. I know this coming Saturday we got a top 5 matchup between Iowa and Penn State, and we're going to see if either one of those guys are for real too. And they both have some pretty good wins, but then again, some of their big wins over Wisconsin are seeming less and less quality. If Iowa beats Penn State by 2 or 3 scores, I think they will solidify themselves as a legitimately good team. And then it's just going to come down to Iowa versus Ohio State to see what happens in the Big Ten. But if everyone else cannibalizes each other, I'm someone who, again, has a soft spot in my heart for Oregon. And when they picked off Ohio State early in the season, I think it was game 1, actually, I was pretty excited about that. I thought, okay, maybe they finally put the pieces together. But then they just got beat by Stanford in overtime. I mean, it was ugly, and it didn't seem like the same team. So you wonder, did they just pull a rabbit out of the hat against Ohio State? Is Ohio State not as good as we think? Did Stanford just make those right plays that we talked about earlier? I don't know. And that's half the fun. But I think Oregon is significantly damaged. So who else is going to take that spot? Cincinnati? Maybe. Are they for real? I have no idea. Notre Dame, they might be 4-1, but they got into some real squeakers with teams that you would think are vastly inferior. So is Cincinnati that good? We don't know. And it really comes down to, I think, does Cincinnati stay undefeated? And does Iowa or Penn State really pull away with the Big Ten? If they don't, if there is some cannibalization, everyone comes away with a couple, 2 or 3 good losses. I don't know how you keep both Alabama and Georgia out, assuming that one is undefeated and one has 1 loss. Again, that loss being to the #1 or #2 team in the country. I don't think you keep them both out.
The strength of schedule argument there is just so powerful.
Yeah.
Like it's hard to come against. That's it.
Yeah, by the end of the season, we'll see what the rankings are in the SEC. But Alabama could go into the playoff weekend, the selection weekend, with 9 wins against ranked opponents. That's something that other teams are not going to have. Even Georgia, because Georgia's on the SEC East and they don't have the same concentration of those teams that the West Side does. So we'll see. And again, Georgia's big landmark win was over Clemson, who's no longer ranked. So are they for real? I really don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Now Georgia's next landmark win is against Arkansas, which Georgia made look very, very human.
Right.
So, the college football transitive property, if you will, doesn't always pan out, because Arkansas could continue to either look really good, and maybe that was just an anomaly against Georgia, and maybe they run into the other buzzsaw when they play Alabama, or kind of the wheels fall off for Arkansas. as teams start to figure them out. But, you touched on Cincinnati. I'm somebody, I'm not a UCF fan, as you know, my allegiances lie elsewhere with Wheaton College, among other teams, which,
Equal caliber.
some of those teams just have one win, a la the Florida State Seminoles. But being in the vicinity of UCF, it's hard not to kind of follow them and things like that. So I do have a soft spot for those group of 5 teams. And, could you see a scenario in which an undefeated Cincinnati gets left out of the playoffs? Or would you be very surprised if an undefeated Cincinnati gets left out? I mean, are you kind of seeing that as a lock for a playoff berth?
If they go undefeated, then I would be shocked if they get left out. One, because they have a couple good quality wins this year, including over Notre Dame, which
that's huge.
I root for Michigan twice a year. That's once against Ohio State and once against Notre Dame. I have no soft spots anywhere in my body for Notre Dame. But the committee says they're good. Cincinnati beat them pretty handily, if you saw that game. And with a lack of other more pedigreed teams with an obvious resume, I don't see how you keep them out this year if they go undefeated the rest of the season.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, especially from a press perspective, over the past couple of years since college football player off has been a thing. Anytime that there is an undefeated team, there's almost outrage that they wouldn't be involved in the playoff to some degree. Like, remember, like even with
you're talking UCF?
There was UCF. There was even a couple years back. I think it was before college football playoff existed. But
Boise State,
Boise, and I'm thinking of Northern Illinois, NIU.
No, well, NIU, they went to the Orange Bowl and they got blown out.
But there was that conversation of they deserve the shot.
Yeah, but I think an FCS school is going to have a really hard time making that transition, whereas at least the group of 5 schools like Cincinnati or Houston went back, before Lamar Jackson ended their dreams.
The point that I have of like it's different than like MAC-10.
Yeah, yes, I think it's very different, and the caliber of opponent, the resume, I think
it's a totally different.
Yeah,
league.
I mean, I think UCF
UCF
is still having their 7th national championship parade from a couple years ago. So I think they got their chance are done. But yeah, I think Cincinnati, they've done enough, and they play good enough opponents that I just don't see it. I don't see a 2-loss Ohio State getting in over them. I don't see it. I don't see a 2-loss Oregon getting in. I just don't. So yeah, I think it'd be really hard given the field and how the previously believed unbeatable Giants have already fallen.
Correct. Yeah, that's a great point. And to that point, I would agree that an undefeated Cincinnati in this landscape of college football should be in the playoffs, especially because, as we've seen, Oregon just fell and no one's giving the Pac-12 any credit. Clemson is no longer ranked, and that was the ACC's best chance of getting a team in. Oklahoma has really, really struggled. They have not blown the doors off of anybody. In fact, weren't they chanting? I believe the student section was chanting for Spencer Rattler's backup last week.
Yep, they were booing the starting quarterback to come out of the game, and they're still undefeated. If Oklahoma remains undefeated, even without controlling any game, they'll get in.
Oh, 100%. I guess my point, though, is this is a great year for a team like an undefeated Cincinnati to at least get that shot for that group of 5 team to make it into the playoffs, because you have at least 2 of the big 5 conferences, Power 5 conferences, really taking a step backwards as it relates to their top teams. So there's nobody from the Pac-12 or ACC really stepping up. And, the SEC has enough street cred to get 2 teams in, but that's really the only conference that has enough street cred to get 2 teams in. Big Ten's not gonna get 2 teams in.
Especially, I mean, if you think of the Big 12, I mean, who even theoretically could get in the playoffs right now? Oklahoma and no one else, as it stands right now. And Oklahoma and Texas are both moving to the SEC.
Yeah, that's what
So,
I'm
I mean,
saying. Oklahoma this year.
yeah. And the ACC right now with Clemson out of it, who could possibly, even theoretically, make the playoffs now? But does North Carolina have only one loss?
I mean, if North Carolina has one loss. Let's see. NC State has one loss at number 23 in the country. The highest ranked team in the ACC is the 5-0. Wait for it. Wake Forest Demon Deacons.
So Demon Deacons are going to get steamrolled.
I take it all back. So Wake Forest, undefeated Wake Forest, is a lock for the playoffs. Yes, you heard it here first. Breaking news.
If they're undefeated.
Right. So yeah, I think it really comes down to how does the Big Ten shape up. That will solidify a lot of the landscape for playoffs, I think. But and like you just said, Tommy, I think SEC has enough of the street cred that all of the other good conference teams want to come there just to bask in the glow that is the street cred. So I don't see anyone else getting them.
I think the argument for increased competition leading better programs,
yes,
is undeniable.
The ability to recruit. So
Absolutely.
In the SEC, I mean, how many people would give up a spot at a better team just to go to an inferior SEC team?
The fact that you can even talk about a college football conference like that of, hey, are you going to play in the SEC versus school X or Y?
Exactly.
Is incredibly powerful. Like, we're about Ole Miss or other places. Like, yeah, they have some history, but part of it is that they're in the SEC.
Yep.
You're going to get looks. You're going to get fans. You're going to get exposure that you won't get anywhere else.
And for that exact reason, fourth hot take of the day, I think Clemson going down and kind of getting embarrassed this way, that's going to hurt the ACC.
Yeah.
Because now it seems like the conference itself is taking a hit. And I think it's going to be hard to get some of those recruits. But of course, you have enough East Coast solid football players that they'll still want to stay domestic. People in North Carolina are still going to want to go to North Carolina. Right. And people in the South Carolina are still going to want to go to Clemson. But I think the prestige of being an ACC football player has been damaged. And some of those top tier recruits are going to end up going to the SEC because they're not going to see the point.
And if they don't turn around in the next couple of years, are you thinking that there's a fluke that they had over like Trevor Lawrence, that kind of stuff? Like, they just had an incredible class during this incredible
Deshaun
time.
Watson, Trevor Lawrence, but now that they're both gone, the place is done. I think if Clemson's defense coordinator, Brett Venables, if he goes to be a head coach somewhere, Clemson's done. You heard it here first.
More things that we heard here first on Friends Stream Sports. Love it, love it, love it. And as we I think you hit on a lot of great points there, right? As Clemson being the bellwether ACC school, there still might be some South Florida guys that get to Miami, but they really haven't put it all together yet. Charlie, you and I have had this conversation before. I think in the ACC, one of the things that strategically on the whiteboard that penciled out was they kind of said, okay, if Florida State, Virginia Tech, Miami, and Clemson all were at least top 25 programs, with one of those programs being a national title contender, that's all the ACC needs. Yep. And with Florida State being absolutely horrible, Miami still not having it put together, Virginia Tech, being a shadow of themselves. And if Clemson takes that step back, I think the ACC as a conference is going to be in some real trouble on the football side of things, and could fall victim to some conference realignment that does not go their favor.
There's precedent there too. So look at when USC got the death penalty, same thing happened to the Pac-12.
Mm-hmm.
I think the same thing could happen with Clemson going down. And if they don't pull it around next year, I think that will be a trend that will make anxious any potential recruits for the future.
No doubt, no doubt. So as we kind of close out our top 10 talk here in college football, I'm going to read to you the AP top 10 as it stands right now. And it's kind of our last question here with this portion is there anyone that you think is overrated? And is there anyone that you think is underrated? And on the underrated side, as I read the AP top 10, underrated could be, Connor, why did you not read this name off? Our AP top 10 as it stands is number 1, Alabama, number 2, Georgia, number 3, Iowa, number 4, Penn State, number 5, Cincinnati, number 6, Oklahoma, number 7, Ohio State, number 8, Oregon, number 9, Michigan, and number 10, BYU.
So I think the overrated is going to be clearly Oklahoma and BYU. I don't think any of those teams are underrated. Underrated. I think with what happened to Ohio State at the hands of Oregon, I think that's damaged them. I think Oregon's most recent failure is going to even solidify that loss as not a great win. Not a quality loss. I can't think of any teams that, off the top of my head, would definitely deserve to be in there that aren't. I'm curious to see how Michigan plays out. Again, not a big Michigan fan, but I do think that Michigan being good is good for the sport. I think them being able to mix it up with some higher quality teams, it's just fun. Michigan is one of those historic pedigree programs that it's just fun to see them not suck. I think that is fun, and I'm curious to see what happens between Iowa and Penn State. But of course, because it's 3 versus 4, whoever wins is not going to drop very low because it will be seen as a quality loss. I'm curious what Michigan State's going to do. They had they had a near miss. I think it was against Nebraska. It took 1 or 2 overtimes to pull away on that one. But they're undefeated, and I like that. I am a little bit of a Michigan State fan. But I can't think of anyone that would definitely deserve to be in the top 10. What do you think?
I'd agree with that. I think it'll be interesting to reflect on this top 10 late in the season, pre-playoffs, like what this would be. Like Notre Dame, absolutely not. And I come from an opposite side of soft spot for Notre Dame. Two of my in-laws have gone there, been able to go to games, like storied history, really cool vibe, but no, they're not in there. I agree with you of the Michigan State. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And Michigan, Ohio State is always a game that you want to see. Mm-hmm. So I think that'll be a factor. Mm-hmm. And I begrudgingly agree with you on the Michigan side of Michigan being good is good for college athletics. Mm-hmm. And I say that with basketball too. Mm-hmm. But I love seeing Michigan lose, but too many times is problematic. Mm-hmm. So I think that'll be interesting. I wonder what is going to happen within that conference if Illinois actually puts things together. That's been the conversation for years.
Hot take, they won't.
So my father-in-law is a donor there and former player. And
someone citing his sources. Nice.
Yeah, no, the amount of money and the amount of just resources that they've put into that program is incredible and inspiring, and like Lovie Smith's vision and all that kind of stuff. And not a thing has panned out.
No, I think
like it's awful. They're doing like customized nutrition for every player, and programs, and it just like shows the argument of this strength of program, strength of schedule that we've been talking about tonight.
Yeah, when it comes to Illinois, that was a team growing up. That's my quote unquote home team. And growing up, I would have loved to play football there. I think that would have been a lot of fun, and I would have won. I've done the math. I would have won 6 games in my 4-year tenure with the program, given when I went to college, and so that would have been hard. And so when I look at this as, or from the perspective of a potential recruit. If you're a recruit, why would you go be an Illini? Why would you do it? Well, I want to play Big Ten football. Well, within a 3-hour drive, there's 3 or 4 significantly better programs. So are you going just because you love the school? Okay, you're going to go. Those kind of kids are going to go there. Maybe their family member, like you said, your father-in-law went there. If my dad went there, that would be a good argument. But if I'm going because I want to play top-tier college football, maybe as a stepping stone into the NFL, if I really have those aspirations, I'm going to a better program. I just am. And no matter how much money you put in the weight room or power bars, I don't see that changing for a recruit.
I agree. And I think that it reinforces our earlier conversation about the SEC and the moves there. So all in all, top 10, I think it makes sense. AP knows a hell of a lot more than I do.
I hope that Arkansas is for real. I would like to think that Georgia got up on them early and they were just shell shocked and couldn't put it together. I like to think that because I want them. Again, a good Arkansas team is good for college football. It's good for the SEC. It's better to have. I think that really contributes to the legend that is the conference. Is that, hey, even our bad teams are good. Right. And we can talk about Vanderbilt another time, but when we got Arkansas, that for a while there they were a 4-8 team every year, and it's nice to see them at least mixing it up. They embarrassed Texas game 1, and they're not a bad team. So again, I like to think that Arkansas lost the game against Georgia more than Georgia won it, but of course that's never fair. And if I were a Georgia fan, I'd be saying just the opposite. But I hope that they are better than that last game really showed.
I'm so looking forward to
No doubt. And I think, just stylistically, as there's a bunch of offensive linemen here on the screen, we can all be very appreciative of the style of football that Arkansas plays. They play a very, and I'm going to quote a real legend here on this podcast here tonight, a real Walt Whitehead style of football.
Yes.
Bring your brass knuckles, your bike chain and your cousin Leo, and get ready for a back alley street fight.
Friend of the show, Walt Whitehead.
Pardon me. Yes. And that's kind of the style that Arkansas plays. I think that, and we've talked about this a lot. I think the Big Ten, there are a lot of highly ranked Big Ten teams in the top 10, and that is going to thin itself out, which is going to, by the end of the season, is going to, maybe create a backdoor conversation for, Oklahoma State's undefeated, right? There could be a bedlam game with an undefeated Oklahoma and an undefeated Oklahoma State that could have a lot of big time implications, right? Michigan still has to play Michigan State, or Michigan State does play Michigan and Ohio State. All those teams still have to play each other. So I can see the Big Ten kind of thinning each other out, and potentially Arkansas making that leap up there into the top 10, depending on how they play Alabama. The Coastal Carolina Chanticleers are undefeated. I think that they still have a lot more winning to do before they could really be taken seriously for a college football playoff spot. But, an undefeated Coastal Carolina being in the top 10, they have Division I players on their team. So we're into that here.
0 ranked opponent schedule.
They're the Chanticleers.
The Coastal Carolina Chandeliers, need to play a few more teams. So as we kind of round out here in our first half, and thank you guys so much, and thanks everybody for being a part of Friends Stream Sports. We're going into one of our big time segments here. We call it Halftime Hot Takes, as we start to transition from college football into the NFL. Halftime Hot Takes is brought to you by our sponsor, Daddles Coffee, in which every bag that you purchase of Daddles Coffee goes towards research for the King Charles Spaniel and all of those health concerns. It's a hand-roasted coffee in Winter Park, Florida. So go to daddlescoffee.com, type in the promo code FSS, and get 15% off of your coffee. So as we round into our halftime hot takes, we know this is a family show, but you know what? There's been some things out there on family shows that I think we need to talk about. And it's Urban Meyer appreciating the grind. And would love to hear some hot takes from our friends here. And I'll give my hot take as well. So Charlie and Tommy, Urban Meyer and all of his shenanigans this past weekend, is this a non-story, or is this the beginning of the end of the Urban Meyer situation in Jacksonville?
I think it's pretty clearly the beginning of the end. And in a vacuum, I think this would be a blip on the radar. It would be a scummy thing and a shady thing if the allegations are correct, which I wasn't there, not going to pretend that I was.
Don't look good.
Yeah, but appreciating the grind, I think Urban Meyer is realizing that it does indeed suck to suck. And the fact that even his wife was getting in on the Twitter beef, when that video was posted by ESPN, his wife, if I'm not mistaken, commented on there, "Meanwhile, I'm babysitting." So that's not great. And I think, again, in a vacuum, this would have just been a blip on the radar that was not appreciated by fans, but went away eventually. But this isn't his only issue right now. He was on staff for about a week before his players revolted because of an assistant coach that he brought on. Now, I don't know all the specifics about that, but in the current climate, I believe it was something along the lines of that coach had said some insensitive things in the past and some more sensitive topics, if I'm not mistaken about what happened there. So that wasn't great. And their team's not doing very hot right now, so that doesn't look great. And after a couple of weeks, a lot of the stories coming out were that Urban Meyer's lost the locker room, that the players did not appreciate his coaching style. I think some of the accusations were that he was treating them like kids, college students, which is more his forte, let's be honest. And that wasn't appreciated. So I think given the litany of problems going on right now, I think we're about a year or two away from his, sporadic heart problem coming back. And then 5 years away from him suddenly emerging as the head coach at USC.
His cluster headaches will be
Yeah.
gone, and the heart issue miraculously clear.
Yeah, Dr. Head Coach opening in a new conference is a miracle worker and very often cures his ailments.
It does.
No doubt. That's a hot take. And, I think, I think that there is a lot of, we got to remember when stories like that come out, which we'll call it 8 times out of 10 should be a non-story. When that becomes a story, that means somebody wants it out. And, you touched on his assistant coach from Iowa, that he brought on, that strength coach. You touch on him losing the locker room. I think Urban Meyer is in a lot of trouble. And, the fact that he had to come out and apologize, everybody on this feed right now, we are all very interested in loving our wives well and things like that, but that does not mean that the rest of the world is necessarily into that. And sometimes folks get into relationships where that's just kind of a thing, and not to say Urban Meyer is one way or the other, but the fact that Urban Meyer had to comment on his personal life in that way, I think is definitely a red flag, because that means that there are folks that came out to put that story out there that didn't need to be put out there, and really in so many ways is a non-story. If the Jags were even 2-2, that would have been a non-story.
And I think, I saw some reports either earlier today or yesterday, I forget which, but some of the top executives of the program were meeting to decide his future.
Mm-hmm.
So I suspect they're going to come out either today or tomorrow and say, well, we all saw the video and it doesn't look good. To be fair, devil's advocate, he could have just been having a drink and this random person, had a few too many Coca-Colas and came over and reduced it. It is Jacksonville. And no offense to Florida residents on this show. I know that we have literally dozens of Florida viewers, but it's possible that he was, I'm not going to say the victim. It's possible that the video looked worse than it was. Very possible. However, again, given the litany, I think he is on, at best, the thinnest of possible ice.
And I think it's important to note the environment of Jacksonville and the owners. So you've got the Cant family, who is very much in the limelight with the media, and especially what Tony Khan is doing with professional wrestling in AEW. So they have a ton of stuff based out of Jacksonville. They've been pushing a bunch of media, AR stuff in the studio, in the stadium. It's a very engaged culture. So I would not be surprised if there is some sort of blowback, especially since Meyer is like a celebrity head coach, right? This is his first year. And this is a big deal because of what he's done in the past. And it's so different from his public persona previously. It's not necessarily shocking. Story from Walt Whitehead before of he had met him at a coaching conference and was told that he was unable to talk to Mr. Meyer by his personal assistant with Meyer 3 feet away from him. Like, very interesting attitude. His contributions to the spread offense are undeniable, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with this, especially since he had to personally address it.
And don't forget, this also falls into what could be perceived as a pattern, because his last couple of years at Ohio State had very similar issues where at least 1 or 2 of his assistants had some accusations of, straight up spouse abuse. So it's just, again, it's all circumstantial, but it's not hard for a layperson to connect those dots.
But we've seen multiple times the jump to the pros is not working out for career college coaches.
Lou Holtz and Nick Saban both made the jump, and it didn't work.
And Pete Carroll had a really rough time his first time around, and then had his success at USC and obviously now at the Seahawks. But
one of the best NFL coaches who at one time was in college, let us not forget the Tom Coughlin era when he was at Boston College. Oddly enough, we always forget about Tom Coughlin, but no, it's not the same thing for sure. There's a story of Nick Saban when he was coaching the Dolphins cussing out Jason Taylor during a walkthrough because Jason Taylor had his shoes untied. And that might work with a 19-year-old that, needs to be taught discipline, but an all-pro, all-timer kind of great guy like Jason Taylor, I wouldn't, if I was Jason Taylor, I wouldn't appreciate being cussed out by anybody due to my contributions to the game. But no, I think, it'll be interesting to see how the Urban Meyer experiment plays out. Word on the street is that, his staff, even after the folks that he had to let go, is still very subpar. And Urban is not necessarily known to be a tactician as much as he is sort of a good organizer and motivator of his team and things like that. So, we'll see, right? What kind of impact could he have in that losing culture of Jacksonville? So as we kind of round out here this evening, and thank you so much for being on Friends Stream Sports tonight, very much appreciated. Want to do a fun segment because, we've got someone like myself within the vicinity of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, someone like you, Mr. Bell, who spends most of his time within the vicinity of the Chicago Bears, and Tommy, dear Mr. Tommy Burgraff, within the vicinity of the Denver Broncos. We know that the NFL might not be the number one sport that we follow, but just as we kind of close out here, would love to hear a couple of quick takes about the teams in which we're close to. So, Charlie, what's going on with Justin Fields? What's going on with the Bears? What's kind of the water cooler talk, if you will, for the Bears?
So, as someone who doesn't particularly follow the NFL, I think I would by default have to say that I'm a Bears fan, if you can even call me that, just because they're a hometown team. I will tell you that I am not optimistic about Justin Fields. I watched him at Ohio State for so long, and I think I can only remember him having a couple good games. Fortunately, one of those good games was against Clemson in the playoffs last year. But after that, he didn't really do much. And so I have been very skeptical that he's going to be the answer for the Bears. And word on the street is there's a lot of displeasure at head coach Matt Nagy's play calling. And when I see people making excuses for the Bears' losses, it's usually, the head coach, he's not a good play caller. He needs to let his OC, take the reins of the offense. And I don't know what the answer is. I can just tell you that I'm very skeptical that Justin Fields is the answer.
Interesting. Wow. Well, that's another hot take. I don't know how hot it is up there in Illinois, but you're heating it up there.
I think people here are desperate to believe that we finally have a good quarterback. So I think they're latching on to any hope, and they want the problem to be elsewhere. They don't want the problem with the team to be the quarterback, because they've told themselves for so long that that was the missing link, and that was the final puzzle piece to fall into place. And if that's not it, it's back to the drawing board, back to square one, whatever torture metaphor you want to use. We'll see. That's why we play the games.
Yep.
No doubt. All right. So according to Charlie Bell, the Justin Fields experiment might not be going as planned. Tommy, any news and notes from the Denver Broncos?
I think Broncos are similar in some ways. There's a huge quarterback focus, and there has been since Elway left. I mean, he is still a fixture in the area. Like, restaurants named after him, car dealerships, his role within the team as an executive vice president. He's a huge presence within Denver and Colorado still. And I think that legacy looms over the team and has continued to do so. The only one who was successfully able to kind of make it his own team as a quarterback was Manning. And I think that was interesting because that was predicated on his performance at the Colts over the better part of 20 years. And so Manning is still revered, but there's a continual question of, is this our quarterback? So this year, I think it's going better. But a continual problem that has existed, that still exists and will continue to exist probably for another season, is the offensive line of the Broncos.
Which is always the excuse when a quarterback underperforms expectations.
It is accepted as a former offensive
Except during
line.
the Tebow years.
Them having some problems. And I think part of that is also, like, who are you recruiting, who are you drafting? So Garrett Bowles was a great pick on paper, but it's easy to hate on Garrett Bowles within Denver of like, well, he's not a left tackle who's pulling his weight. For years, he was the youngest dude on the team. Fresh rookie being the left tackle. No pressure, man.
Yeah, really.
Like he hadn't gone up at that consistent caliber all the time, and we had to build out the rest of the line. So if it's a 5-year bet, sure, I think that's awesome. I'm hoping that they continue to actually invest in the offensive line, because you saw with Manning, it was almost 5 years ago with when they played the Seahawks. Seahawks defense completely made Swiss cheese of Broncos offensive line. And that has been, I would say, a huge weak spot of theirs, of, just being the traditional team that they used to be, a triple option, figure it out, doesn't always work anymore. And you need to be able to air it out. And if you're not giving your quarterback the time, it doesn't matter if it's Aaron Rodgers, who was in the conversation this summer. If they don't have a solid offensive line, they're not going to compete. And Denver's defense is perennially excellent. And defense does win championships. But if you can't protect your quarterback, you're not going to even get there.
And Tommy, I would say the number one thing to take solace in for the Broncos with a poorer offensive line is there's not exactly a stellar defense in the AFC West between the Chargers, the Raiders, and the Chiefs. So at least take solace in that the best pass rusher really does play for the Broncos. I'm going to give two quick takes, because although I am in proximity to Tampa, I do follow the Las Vegas Raiders. I think that a lot of what Tampa Bay is going to be doing is going to hinge upon Richard Sherman, which does not bode well for a Super Bowl repeat if you're having to really rely on an old cornerback / safety in the secondary, especially in a conference with a Green Bay and a Seattle. The Bucs are going to be able to score a lot of points, but the secondary has really had some issues this year so far. So I think that's a concern. And I really think the Raiders are going to come back to earth. They kind of got blitzkrieged in the first half against the Chargers last night, being down 21-0 at half, although the game ended up a little better. So as we end real quick, want to very, very briefly get to our final segment, and that is picks. And what we're going to do is we've got a few college football games, and we'll just go round robin real quick. I'm going to throw the ranking and the team, and you're going to tell me who you pick. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Awesome.
All right. So first off, we have number 6 Oklahoma versus number 21 Texas. Who are we picking?
I'm picking Texas. I'm rooting for Oklahoma, but I think Texas is going to do it.
There's a part of me that but I'm going to go with Oklahoma.
So Texas, OU, and I'm going to pick OU. I think that they're going to pull out there. Next up, number 2 Georgia versus number 18 Auburn.
I've watched Auburn barely limp across the finish line against some of these inferior opponents. I'm going Georgia all the way.
Yep. Another team of Auburn's? Sure.
Yeah.
But not this year.
Yeah, I think Georgia might win by 100. I don't think Auburn's really all that good.
I think statistically it is not off the table.
Yeah. And then finally here, probably the big game, number 4 Penn State at number 3 Iowa.
That could go either way. I am going to pick Iowa. I think that their defense has proven capable of shutting down Penn State's pretty reliable run game, including their mobile quarterback. And I really think that if Iowa takes that away, Penn State is not good enough to pass the ball to win.
All right, Bell's going Iowa. What are you going, Burgraff?
I agree with Charlie and you. And I also want Iowa to win.
Mm-hmm.
I do too. I just think it would be good for their program and for college football in general.
I'm going to be the contrarian here, and as we're all hanging out this weekend, you might laugh at me. I think Penn State is going to win. I think Iowa is usually overrated. I think both teams actually are usually overrated. But Iowa they got to prove it to me. Maybe it's because Penn State has kind of won more traditionally that I'm kind of leaning more Penn State. But I mean, it'll be rocking for sure. But I think Penn State is going to have just a little bit more juice about them to finish that off. But Tommy and Charlie, thank you so much for co-hosting tonight. Very much appreciate it. And we hope you have a great night. Any parting words for our viewers and fans and podcast listeners out there?
No,
none.
I think we covered everything I wanted to touch on today.
Good. And you've touched me. So
spiritually. Yeah, I don't want to do an Urban Meyer situation going on and be on the news tomorrow.
Gotta appreciate the grind.
Yeah.
You never know. All 6 of our podcast listeners might turn you in. Anyhow, very much appreciated. Thank you so much. And we sign off in Friends Stream Sports the way that we sign back on. So I'm Connor.
I'm Charlie.
I'm Tommy.
And this is Friends Stream Sports. Thank you so much for being here tonight.